Okay, we're going to kick off. We're going to kick off. Just want to welcome Luke and his family, and especially Helena. Thank you so much, and Robert and their lovely partners, wives, for coming today to Rothe House. It's a very special occasion. When Luke first contacted us back in April, or maybe I think it was, I'm not sure, but very early on, Luke came with an enthusiasm about his father. So I can't wait to hear about it, and also for him to share the stories and your life as well together, Helena. And so thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Liselott. And the first thank you I have to give is straight back to the group that organised the festival, Liselott, Aoife and Orla, who have been, I was met immediately with great warmth, and I feel that fed an enthusiasm. I said to them, I'd like to talk about this, and would you be willing to let me talk a little bit? And they said, not only would we like you to talk, we think it would be a highlight of the festival. So that was a great way to be met. I wanted to talk about Peter Brennan. Obviously my father, so that's one of the hats he had as sort of father and husband. He's known mainly as a potter, and that is maybe something that I'm not going to really cover today, because I think there's a lot more that's as interesting to sort of look at. You probably have seen that there's a little brochure that I've put on the seats, and what that really is a sort of a college scrapbook, a look at the sort of the person that came down here, the sort of what he had done in the college, and what the person that turned up in Kilkenny really, which is interesting. I'll also try and paint a little bit of a picture of what Kilkenny was like when he turned up, because I think that's also just as interesting. To complete the thank yous, like I said, the people who organised the festival, thanks to them. Also, obviously, thanks to my family, particularly my mother. My wife, Eugene, is here, and also my brother, Robert, and his wife, Helena. But I think my mother's story is every bit as interesting as my father's. And I think it's part of my joy in sharing this story is that she gets to see it and enjoy it. But anyway, to finish off the thank yous, I want to thank a couple of people who did some research which helped me put this together. Professor John Turpin from NCAD, who did a wonderful biography of Peter Grant, the sculptor. He's the guy on the left of Oliver Shepherd there. The guy on the right is my father, Peter Brennan. So two Peters there. And then also Professor Peter Jordan, who's here today from Waterford, who put together a great history of the Kilkenny gallery setup, which happened, in the 1940s when my father came down to Kilkenny. And I was saying to him, Peter is our, Latin of the Latin for comes from the Latin of, he was the rock on which I built my research. It's always good to have a good foundation, and there was great work done there. So I really appreciate that. So they're the main thanks. One last thank you is, you may know in 2008, there was an exhibition here about my father, Peter Brennan, and that came about as a result of Michael O'Dwyer, who was a member of the Kilkenny Archaeological Society, who had, heard through talking to James Delahunt and Margaret Phelan, stories of, in the early days, how this guy Peter Brennan had helped start things up, And he thought, well, there wasn't any mark of him left on Kilkenny, and there should be some way to sort of celebrate that and record it. So they had a lovely exhibition here in 2008. Sadly, he passed away this year, but you know, you know, he lives on in these things. I'm sure there's 100 other people who have nice things to say. I mean, but it all started, I was looking last night at a letter that he sent to my mother saying these things that, you know, he had sort of heard so many stories and it was nice to put them together. But the people, you know, and I think a lot, you know, whether you're talking about the work that goes on here in Rothe House or organising galleries or anything like that, also the festival that organising this very event, you know, there's a sort of a constant theme that I kept going back to is, you know, this thing where good people like come together and do useful work. You know, I think that's all that's needed in order for culture to be created. You know, and that's, you know, that's how we get it. I don't think there's any better recipe than that. But yeah, so that's the thank yous. I'm very, like I said, very glad to be here, and thank all of you as well for turning up. More people turned up than I expected. A lot of people who I send very random emails to came along, and I'm really appreciative of that. Yeah, but I think it's going to be worth your while. It's a very interesting story. So yeah, and to sort of to find a way into it, let me tell you that 2025, it's actually the 30th celebration of, or the 30th anniversary of the last time my father was down here in 1995, which was an anniversary in itself. He was down here for the 50th anniversary of the setting up of Kilkenny Archaeological Society, which ended up purchasing Rothe House, one building, then 20 years later purchasing the building next door, 10 years later, you know, purchasing the building next door to that. And that sort of, again, that sort of constant useful work is not about my father, but it's about all the people that come together and try and make these things happen. I remember 1995 very well because my father came here. I've got a lovely photo of him just out in that garden there, in a bow tie. Hubert Butler is there, and a lot of people sort of celebrating, you know, a lot of good work that has been done. Sadly, the week after that, my father passed away. So that was, you know, obviously a difficult time for us all, but it sort of gives a point at which we can sort of look back on the life he had and try and sort of make some sense of it. So, like I said, that was the end. But if we go right back to the beginning, so Peter Brennan, he was born in 1916 in Glasstool, just off the side of Dunleary, and everyone knows 1916 was a difficult time. When he was 4 or 5 years of age, his father disappeared. As everyone knows, the War of Independence was on. I don't know an awful lot about his father. All I know is about this particular part of it is that he told my mother that he watched as a 5-year-old his father's boat heading off to England, and you know, to never be seen again. And that was obviously a difficult thing for him, and probably a difficult thing for me in a way as well, because like I can't imagine a more pivotal thing to happen in your life when, you know, I suppose your father is to some extent a blueprint of who you could be, and without that blueprint you're always going to be trying to find a method to replace that frame that isn't there. And I think my father was very lucky in that he had the capacity and the determination to, through his own personal discipline, work and develop skills that allowed him to develop his own identity. He was lucky in that his mother he was the eldest of three children. So his mother had to move back into the family home with her 9 brothers. So, and her 3 children under 5, which I'm sure wasn't easy. But fortunately, her father, my father's grandfather, was a builder, and he had a workshop, and my father learned how to make things. And I think that was his path to develop a sense of self. He started to do carpentry. He started, making boats. He was always interested in sailing, and it allowed him to, small bits of painting and drawing and all those things that were sort of containing a rhythm with which he could develop himself. And by the end of the time he finished college, he'd won the Taylor Scholarship twice. And I'm almost tired of hearing that, because almost every article that he is mentioned in, it mentions it. And I think he almost used it as a shield. It was his identity that he could sort of get through anything with. And I think that core making gene must have been there with the building background. But I think that he sort of passed that on a little bit. I think, in every house, in every family, we all have our gods. And I think in our house, the god was making. If you could make things, if you could do things with your hands, that was to be able to do things with your hands is a special thing. And I think he developed those tools himself. He ended up getting to the point where he was offered a place in the College of Art and Design in Dublin, then the Metropolitan School of Art. And he, after spending 2 years in the evening courses, he was offered a scholarship into as a day student, so he could develop his skills as a sculptor. This picture here, many of you will probably know, that's Oliver Shepherd standing in the middle, who is probably one of the most well-known Irish sculptor. He got 2 years training with him. I remember my father telling me he was very proud about the fact that he had gone in there, having convinced his mother to give him the money for 1 year of tuition, and had managed in that 1 year to win the Taylor Scholarship in 1936, in his first year as a full student. It was a combination of that and the fact that he had, along with Peter Grant, who sang there, these 2 guys in 1935, they won the teacher training scholarship for the college, along with Michael Bourke, whose son Aoife is here, I was glad to see. And the 3 of them, I think, whoever it was that was on the board for the scholarship committee there, they did a very good job, because in the case of my father, he first of all, as a potter, when he came down to Kilkenny, he gave he started the first, second level pottery ceramic student classes in Ireland, and then a few years later, in the 60s, he started to set up the first third level course in NCAD. So that in itself, I think, is a nice contribution. But also as founder member and first chairman of the Craft Council, as founder member along with my mother of the Crafts Potter Society, which became Ceramics Ireland, also founder member of the Society of Designers, and along with setting up right here in Kilkenny, just across the street, the Ring Ceramic Studios, which was the first studio pottery in Ireland. And I think it's very interesting, you know, we're living in a world now with things changing very fast, but I think it's a good sign when you think that he set up the first studio pottery in Ireland, and now in Kilkenny there's 29 studio potters, you know. I think there was a fear at the time that, you know, mass production was going to take over everything, and same way as a lot of people are afraid today of AI and how that's going to change things. Whereas actually, when you look back, and this is one of the nice things about looking back, you know, things are actually going in the other direction. People are appreciating more things being made with your hands, and, you know, things that have a sort of bit of personality as opposed to the sameness that comes with mass production. So I think that's, you know, all those things were very positive. Peter Grant, who, you know, his career mirrored my father's in a lot of ways, in that he went to the college, then became a lecturer. He then left to set up his own private practice, but in doing that, he set up the Irish Sculptors Institute, which was a very strong body for developing, you know, the role of sculptors within the Irish arts. Again, I was reading John Turpin's biography of his, and, you know, it's just, again and again, he's fighting for the rights of the people who should be seen for doing the good work that they're doing. And that body actually turned into Visual Artists Ireland, which anyone working as an artist will know has the comprehensive newsletter of artist events. So, you know, like I said, they were two guys, and like I said, the third guy there, you know, the third scholarship student, Michael Bourke, he at 28 years of age became the director of the College of Art. So this is just, you know, 7 or 8 years after they first came in as youngsters. He set a lot of the curriculum for secondary level art. He arranged visits to all the VECs to establish the standards, and also then later on with my father organising some stuff on the ground. They organised a travelling exhibition to get a standard set in art around the municipalities. So yeah, so I think, like I said, those guys did a huge amount, and I think it's nice to sort of think about all of them. But yeah, coming back to my father, that was very much the guy that came down here. To go again through what's in the leaflet already, he came into the college in 36, won the Taylor Scholarship. 37, Peter Grant won it. He was also a sculptor. And then in 1939, the pair of them worked with Professor Herkner to model the giant figures outside the 1939 Irish Pavilion at the New York World Fair. And that was, you know, it was just a building, but it was at a time when Ireland was trying to define itself as a nation. It was a young blank canvas of a nation, and Michael Scott won the gold medal for, you know, his pavilion, and the sculpted figures were highly commended. People, you know, like Sean Keating had these giant paintings of Aodh na Cruise that had just a few years earlier. I think we've just hit the 100th the centenary of Aodh na Cruise. I mean, Aodh na Cruise in itself is a pretty amazing thing. I think that year it was a fifth of the national budget was spent on creating Aodh na Cruise, and when it was made, it was going to produce more power than was actually used in the country at the time. So it was a huge undertaking, and I think Sean Keating actually off his own bat started painting it. He was so entranced by it. And afterwards, the ESB bought a lot of the paintings that he did from it. But I think that sort of that spirit of enthusiasm, that electrification, literally through Ard na Cróise and through like I said, the blank canvas that was ahead of them, meant that when Peter Brennan came down here, he was feeling like things could be done. Michael Scott was in his early 30s. My father had been already making contact with Victor Waddington, who was the main art dealer in Dublin at the time. He was in his early 30s. Most of the cabinet ministers were in their early 30s, or were in their 30s or 40s. So it was a very young, vigorous time, and these people wanted to go out and they wanted to to try and sort of say something. So my father came down in September 1941 to get a job, half in Carlow, half in Kilkenny VEC, and one thing that should also be mentioned is the VEC today is maybe I think it's not like the full value of the VEC is not understood. People don't think about it. I mean, I was talking to someone from the VEC here in Kilkenny, and they are now they've got 20,000 people learning with the VEC in Carlow, Kilkenny. There's 15,000 teachers. It's a huge operation, and that was only started in and around 1930. So when my father came down, it was a 10-year-old organisation, and when he came down, there was a spanking new area in the Kilkenny VEC where he was going to be working, and that was part of the excitement of the time. There was there was a real sort of space to be filled by what they were doing. So what happened was that, and the other thing that Peter had been doing was, and at this stage he was a sculptor. I mean, he had worked in clay, but he hadn't actually done a whole lot of pottery. So the other thing that he was working, he was also doing watercolors at this point, and he was exhibiting in the Irish Watercolor Society. So he had a couple of things that he was good at, that he knew about, and he came down to Carlow in September. In January, he decided, by January, he had already decided to set up an exhibition. And it wasn't just an exhibition of his work. As far as I can see, it was an exhibition of his sculptures, and then he got basically everyone he knew. And because he was already exhibiting in the RHA, and he was also, had a relationship with Victor Waddington, a lot of the people, and also a lot of the people who had worked in the 1939 World Fair, they were the top painters at the time. So people like Maurice McGonigal, Harry Kurnoff, and like that were, like I said, there was an article written saying that it was good that they were involved in the 1939 World Fair, because that gave other people a chance to exhibit at the RHA, because they were, those two and John Keating were such a force. But the interesting thing was that, and I think we all remember very recently, we had a situation with COVID where we had a time where there wasn't much to do, right? And there wasn't much you could do. And remember that war has just broken out. So this is the emergency. And not only is there not that much to do, everything is rationed, including fuel. So you can't really go anywhere either. So it's a little bit like COVID times. So in the same ways, there might have been guys, I see a lot of guys who started up as like sourdough bakers or whatever during COVID and became very popular. I think there was a timing thing that worked very well in Peter's favour, that he convinced the head of the VEC in Carlow and also the head of the VEC in Kilkenny to allow him to have an exhibition. And like I said, he managed not only to get Harry Kernoff and all these people down to Carlow on a wet night in January, which to the opening, and they were selling paintings there, but it was very well received. And like I had a look and I saw that there is maybe 30 exhibitions of contemporary art a year in Kilkenny now. This was the first exhibition of national standard contemporary art that can be recorded. The papers at the time say that that's what this was. So he did in Carlow, and to great success. And the plan was then 2 weeks later, it happened in the VEC down here. And that was, again, there is a, Fergus O'Ryan, the painter, he was one of the exhibitors there, and he came down to it, and he said that 200 people went through the gallery in 2 hours. He said it was like a circus came to town. So it was a lovely way to sort of, having only been here 3 months, to have created this spark, partially due to good timing because there was a latent demand for it. But he managed to get all the people out and get them enjoying it. The paintings were for sale. You could have bought a Maurice McGonagall painting for £15, and I think they sell for tens of thousands of pounds now. Harry Kernoff, I think it was £15, and I think one of those sold for 180,000 pounds recently, euros recently. So there was good bargains to be got. But when they were taking down this exhibition, a couple of people said, this is really good. Like, what are we going to do next? Are we going to, set up some sort of group or whatever? So that happened. The Kilkenny, a group called the Society for the Encouragement of Art in Kilkenny, VEC, was set up, and it was a subscription-based service where they said, okay, everyone puts in, I think, 5 shillings a month, and after a few years we'll have a few paintings, and we'll see how that works. And they also convinced, this was happening. The first exhibition my father had arranged was in the VEC in Kilkenny, and they convinced the Dr. Welch, the CEO of the VEC, to open a gallery there, to allow for them to be allowed to use that as a gallery space. So they had a space, and they had a group of people that were interested in art. So they came together and they got some very nice paintings, including a Jack Yates. Within 2 or 3 years, they had a very decent group of paintings, and they showed them for maybe 20 years in the VEC, and that was the collection that then moved to the Kilkenny Castle, which became the Butler Gallery, and now is in the new Butler Gallery. So so I mean, even in that, and I think it's interesting. My father's Rona. He, like I said, he knew a way to make things happen, and he had a very disciplined approach to things. I don't think he was interested at all. When I look at his thing, I wonder, maybe why he didn't look for more credit for the work he did. And I just don't think it was part of what he was, what he was looking for. He was trying to progress things, and he would work towards his interests. I mean, there's also, even in the case of, the other people that worked alongside him, it takes a lot of people. It's like I said, it's never, it's always a number of people, with the enthusiasm that brings the whole thing along. But I think that was a great start to things. And I mean, as a result, I suppose relationships deepen as you, you start working with more people. And, within 5 years, Hubert Butler rang up his friend, Dr. Phelan, and said, let's set up, I think we could do a good, sort of rebirth of the old Kilkenny Archaeological Society. And then in 1945, they met in the club hotel and the clubhouse hotel, and I was surprised to find that. I mean, my father was not yet 30, but when they set this organisation up, it was Ray Crotty, the local baker who was serving mayor at the time. He was chairman of the new Kilkenny Archaeological Society, and the two honorary secretaries were Hubert Butler and Peter Brennan. So I think he must have been admired at that point, or respected at that point enough for a young guy to be given that position. And I think that certainly the energy that he brought was part of that sort of, when people see things happening, they want to do other things. And I think that's a good example of the sort of domino effect of doing good and useful things. So yeah, and I mean all this was very interesting. And the final thing I'd like to talk about is that the two guys, like I said, here are part of the story, and the other guy, Michael Bourke, isn't in the photo, but he's in the flyer. He was the other scholarship guy. He had now got that position as director of the College of Art and Design. And I think Peter had success with this little mini travelling exhibition, started in Carlow, went down to Kilkenny, everyone loved it. And I think arranged by Michael Bourke and maybe organised on the ground, they managed to pull together a more extensive exhibition. The way they described it in the Kilkenny People at the time was that this first exhibition was the germ of the idea, which turned into this travelling exhibition. And the travelling exhibition had many of the artists that were in this first exhibition that he did, but also included Sir John Lavery paintings. I think there was like Sean Keating, there was Nathaniel Hone, Jack Yates. There was, a sort of a new level of sort of energy as a result of the connection with the College of Art and the National Gallery. So there was a group then of, I think 61 painters or 61 paintings that was put together. And what they did was a very pragmatic and simple thing. Was they said, we've got all these paintings. If you have a VEC, if you want to run a show, we will deliver them to you. All you have to do is set them up, light it well, and manage it. And they notified all the VECs. And what happened was that people loved it. And the exhibition actually travelled 2 or 3 circuits of Ireland over 3 years. I've found at least 50 examples of this exhibition being shown in different locations. Up in Sligo, where my younger brother Fergal currently works. He's not here tonight because he's teaching animation students up in Sligo, or up in Leitrim. But the fact that this went to every corner of Ireland, and not only that, it also I looked at the Highline Gallery in Dundalk. It has in its origins a sort of history article, and it says that the gallery was started up as a result of a travelling exhibition of 61 paintings that came around town in the 1940s. So a couple of people, ideas, germs of ideas turning into people working together, turning into the bigger things. I think there's a nice sort of pathway through from, you know, remembering that, you know, I was just saying this to my mother on the car on the way down. It's difficult to do something that hasn't been done before. You know, it really is. And people who try things should really be celebrated. Because there was a lot of people, including my father, who were trying things in places that that activity wasn't there before. But I think when you look at the whole thing, you have to say that we haven't even talked about him being a potter, you know. And even still, in all this work he's done, I think he's planted enough seeds and created enough sort of enthusiasm that municipal galleries exist today that maybe wouldn't be there without that work. So yeah, okay. So that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed all that. I think maybe myself and Liselott will take any questions you have about that. I hope you have some questions.
Amazing, Luke. I just want to say as well, when we just described firstly when we first met, myself and Orla on the Zoom call, but just your enthusiasm for your father's work, and allowing us to kind of have an insight into his background, even though, like, I know Helena has a lovely printed book on his work in 2008 that was here in exhibition. But just to delve deeper into his background in early childhood, you know, his father leaving and don't know what happened, and yet he had access to this workshop. Would you like to kind of tell us a bit more about maybe? Yeah, well, I think, I mean, and I think when I looked at articles where he was being asked about the people, you know, he was teaching in the VEC, and I think, you know, remembering that, you know, free secondary education only came about in the 60s. So this is at a time where going to the VEC was almost like going to third level today. And he had, you know, a belief that, you know, self-expression was available to everyone and you just had to reveal it. And I guess that's what he had learned. He'd been in a bit of a bind. He had to try and work out how to, you know, create a path in life, and this was the path that worked for him, and he wanted to share it. Yeah, and he was very vibrant, I think I would call it, that's the word I might use, in that path, because, I mean, coming from a background of like a labourer, and coming into like the space of being an artist. You know, I mean, it's easy for us these days to say we're an artist, but back then it would have been a total different mindset even, and to be in that space is, well, that's it, and there would have been a huge amount of self-belief required to say, okay, well, I can make things, because, so, you know, his father had been a plasterer, and his mother's father was a contractor, like a you know, he built houses, and you know, but they had, you know, a few guys working there, and they had a shed, and, you know, where they could make things, they had a gravel yard. So, you know, he had facility, and he, I guess, turned that into, I've got some lovely photos of him, you know, about him making a boat and launching it in Dunleary, Yarn, Sandy Cove. I think he discovered this was a way that he felt good about himself. And like I said, I think that, you know, I can only imagine that he felt very unmoored by the experience of his father leaving and whatever. So I suppose this is a way, I mean, on a personal level, you know, I mean, like, you know, I'm coming at this, you know, with a lot of enthusiasm. It's an excavation of self for me as well. You know, I wouldn't have been the most disciplined person in the world growing up. You know, as a teenager, I was, you know, anyone who knew me as a teenager is laughing now, right? But that, you know, so he looked at me and he saw, you know, like he had this path, and he saw me bouncing off the walls, and he tried to think, okay, well, you know, there's no hope for this guy because he can't follow the path. And I mean, I think I matured at about 35, you know.
I think that's...
And by that stage, your father had done all of this.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And just, talking about access to materials and access to a workshop, Victor Waddington, was very instrumental. I suppose, like I read that Victor Waddington had the Art Limited gift shop, which your father and John French used to make work for, and yet the work was sold and the money was going to go back and support these young artists. So, having that kind of patronage.
Well, I mean, Victor Waddington had about, in the 1950s, he had about 10 of the top artists working, basically paying them a wage and saying, give me your work, and but he made it possible to have a living as an artist in Ireland in the 1950s, which is quite an achievement. There's a summary of my father's time here in Kilkenny in the book that my mother put together for the exhibition, and he says in that Victor Waddington, without him nothing could have happened. I was talking to Stephen Quigley, who's a local guy who worked in the Ring Ceramic Studios in the 1950s, and he was saying to me that there wasn't really anything here that himself and Peter Brennan and John French were thought of as two weirdos, across the road. The guys from the Smithwick's Yard used to be shouting over them, thinking who are these people, And but the only way that it had been made work was Victor, the friends that my father had in Dublin that were taking his work every week, selling it, and and making that possible. So there's all these connections that made the thing happen.
Yeah, and your father was very good at making connections, it seems, because if I can just go back to my notes if you want. You mentioned that Ray Crotty, right? So Ray Crotty was the baker here, and then I read that one of the kilns, or the kiln in the Ring, was like an old bakery, an old kiln for baking bread. And your father converted it into first wood fired, then coal, and then oil. Yeah. Well,
I mean, I grew up making my pocket money mixing clay, right? That was how it worked in our house, and we had a giant dough mixer that we would put our clay into and mix it up, and that came from Crotty's. I mean, there was Martin Crotty was a very good friend of my father's as well, and there's generations of Crottys. I mean, all these names. It's funny, when I was doing this research, people like the Crottys, the Butlers, the Lucreys, all these families that people from Kilkenny names. It's only when I read them, I obviously know someone here because although I hadn't listened to my father, he told me all these stories, it's nice to actually come back and actually be able to sort of receive the information.
Yeah, exactly. It's lovely. And so, your dad came from growing up in a workshop. So when he first decided to make his first electrical, and he had to order parts from Sweden. Yeah. Swedish connection there. Yeah. And I wonder, was there any crossover with the Kilkenny Design Workshops at the time? Because that was 1962 and...
well, my mother's the person for that. I don't think it was before that.
Yeah. Before that. Oh yeah, no, I know that. I was just wondering, was there any connection?
He had already moved. That was one of the sad things about the Kilkenny Workshop.
Yeah.
They didn't actually take much notice of the people who were doing things here.
Yeah.
They said we had no natural ability,
And Victor Waddington, I got your quote, he described the work as muck of the highest order.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that was, one element of what they were doing. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at, it's funny because, there's a practicality to what he did. Yeah. I myself run a business. I know that, you have to keep, the money coming in. Yeah. And so their idea was that they would make their own studio pottery pieces, but if Victor Waddington could keep the kiln packed with sort of souvenirs and shamrock ashtrays and whatever else, that was a great way to make sure that things worked,
Yeah.
you know. And I think, you know, like, again, talking to Stephen Quigley, he was saying that, you know, in the 50s, like, nothing was given to you, you know. There was no grants, there was no support bodies. Everything you did was off your own bat. And so, you know, it was hard. It was a hard environment. You know, Stephen Quigley said that, you know, people that were working in the ring ceramic studio, no one was allowed to talk because everyone had to focus so much on getting the work done. It's maybe, you know, sort of not what we think of a pottery studio now, but it was a hard time, you know.
Yeah, and it was probably like it was during the war and just after the war
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so any kind of a job would have been important, and to
Yeah.
get any income was so important
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
yeah.
And so I'll just go back to my notes here. You talked about like a circus coming to town. So whenever I can imagine like your dad being here and just making all these like colourful pieces and setting up like the municipal gallery, you know, Kilkenny's Butler Gallery now, kind of in that sense. That the energy that he had for all of this, and he surrounded himself with really good people. Do you think that that was really instrumental in your father's kind of?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he had a natural sort of vigor,
yeah.
you know, and he was, you know, like, you know, he was a cultured guy, and he was really deeply interested in things. I mean, in the biography of Peter Grant, they talk about, you know, I mean, and they were sort of, you know, it wasn't just about themselves. They were coming down, so almost evangelizing about what Ireland could be, you know.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a sort of energy that is beyond yourself. You're not thinking so much about, you know, yourself. And even in terms of, like, it mentions that they were reading, you know, religious sort of, you know, books at the time that gave them enthusiasm. And Peter Grant's, you know, sculpture, he says the wellspring was, you know, religion, you know, that they really, and I think I was reading an article recently that they were saying that, you know, in the 1930s and 1940s, if you were a young enthusiastic guy wanting to change the world, you became a missionary. You know, you didn't start a, you know, tech startup. Like, it was a different, you know, sort of,
yeah.
I
mean, the religion was huge.
Yeah. So I think that sort of, like, that drove them. And then when he turned up, probably, you know, there was probably like a dearth of people who were cultured. So for him to come in, and all these people were just dying to have someone that, you know, wanted to start up a gallery or talk about art or all these things.
Yeah, and have an input that is maybe slightly different to their own. Yeah. And the fact that you were saying your dad went to, you know, he did 2 years evening courses first because probably couldn't afford the day course. The day
well, I think there was
college.
the standard thing that, like, you did a year or two where you sort of learned your trade, and based on that, you'd you know, go for the scholarship. I mean, Peter Grant as well. I mean, he lost his mother when he was young. So you know, the pair of them were, you know, they wouldn't have gone through college if it wasn't for a scholarship. And you're talking about materials. I think they got £6 per month and as much materials as they could use. So I think that's a good, you know, use of materials.
Yeah, and especially with, you've got young, vibrant artists working together. They're like, let's see what we can do together. And okay, another question then. So you spoke about your dad building a boat and sending it off into Leary Harbour. He also was a watercolourist, and I've seen some of his watercolours, and they're beautiful. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
well, I think that, I mean, I can only say what I think, you know, but I mean, about his watercolours, you know, like, I mean, the Watercolour Society, I think, you know, is a prestigious organisation, and they, you know, noted him as a new entrant to the society. And also there was some, you know, he exhibited, I think, 2 or 3 times, like, solo exhibitions here in Kilkenny and also in Carlow. And I think that, people enjoyed it. I mean, like, I think his watercolours are interesting, but, like, again, I think it's the energy around them that's more interesting. Like, there's articles about, you know, young groups of sketchers being seen cycling off around, you know, Kilkenny County, having been inspired by his classes. And, you know, that they worked out, there's some thatched cottages, you know, at the other side of Kilkenny, and they'd all go out there and try and, you know, paint those, whatever. There's a lovely article where someone just gives the day of an artist going out and trying to capture something in watercolors, and then the rain comes and maybe they won't get to keep the painting, and you know, it's just, there's an enthusiasm there for it. I think to me that's the value, you know.
Yeah, and the fact that your father passed it on to his students, because he was like in the VEC teaching in Carlow and Kilkenny for a number of years, and continued to do that while he set up the ring, isn't it?
I think so he was 1941 he started teaching, and then 1945 he gave that up to start up the ring with Victor Waddington. But I think in that time he had I saw one interesting article said that they had entered the students in a poster design competition, and one of the VEC, the Kilkenny VEC guys, had won the national prize ahead of NCAD students. So he was obviously
very happy about that. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Any more questions? Yes, you mentioned the travelling exhibition, and that there were 61 paintings that went on tour to the technical schools, and 13 of those technical schools took it on and set it up, and like in that era of like, you know, maybe you don't travel very much, and to get exposure to artwork, like, you know, you mentioned Jackie Yates, Sir John Lavery, Sean Keating's work. That exposure. Yeah,
well, that's what they talked about, like a standard. You know, giving people a standard is an essential part of their growth. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I think there was a number of people, like I said, like Michael Bourke. I mean, another part of it is that you know, like they were, you know, they stayed connected. You know, like not. There's a funny parallel in the lives of the two Peters, where they started college the same day. They started preliminary college the same day. 2 years later, they both got the scholarships together. Then they went through college together. They left for a teaching job for 5 years. Peter Grant in the College of Art, Peter Brennan down here. Then they set up their own practice. Peter Grant as a sculptor for 20 years. Peter Brennan as a potter. But then Michael Bourke, who was the other guy of the three that got the job, he was still head of the college, so he invited them back to teach in the college again. So the three of them were back together, and they retired together.
Which is amazing.
So it's an amazing
circular story.
Yeah.
And my first time hearing about Peter Brennan was when I was in the ceramics department in NCAD in 1996, and he just passed away the previous year. And that was my first introduction to your father. And obviously then so I think I'm very curious as to what's going to be next in the story of Peter Brennan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I obviously only covered a very small bit of ground, so I'm hoping for an invite back next year. You know, where
to extend his story.
Oh, we might even talk about pottery, right?
We could. Exactly, we didn't even talk about pottery, which is great. That was lovely. Is any questions from the floor? Would be great. Does anybody have anything?
Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that talk, Luke. You filled in some more detail about your father's contribution. I'd known of it before previously, but I'd not been so much aware of it. And it reminds me very much of the fact that these touring exhibitions played such a key role in developing enthusiasm for the arts. I'd not realised about his involvement with that so much, you know, that he was instrumental in setting up that kind of thing. But I had been aware of the importance of them, particularly in encouraging the idea, the concept of a kind of an Irish arts form, you know, or Irish art type. So very, very interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of Kilkenny, it's interesting the way, say, the Pennyfathers get a lot of the credit for setting up the collection. But perhaps that's a bit overstated in some ways, isn't it? And I think the presence of the art school and your father's role in it, particularly, was equally or perhaps more important in some ways. Very interesting.
Yeah, well, and I actually, on your first point there, there's a lovely article of what, you know, when the exhibition is travelling around, like in Kilkenny and in Carlow and also in Portlaoise, you know, my father gives the address to try and, you know, explain the exhibition a bit to people. And one of the really nice things here, the third person who isn't in this photograph, Michael Bourke, his son Aoife Bourke is here, so I'm very happy that he is here. When they go to Portlaoise, my father gives it, and it's recorded in the paper. And so there's a lovely article which I can make it available to anyone who wants it. And one of the nice things is that all these articles that I picked up on when I looked at Abe's website, he has a repository of articles, and they're the same articles, so it's nice. Yeah, I mean, you get a sort of sense of the man, you know, from the introduction. He goes, you know, he's very interested in people. Like he feels that this is, you know, something that people should be made available to people. It's a, you know, it's a gift for them if they can open it. I mean, I learned some things from it. You know, I mean, even he talks about, you know, like we've all these paintings. You know, like how do we interpret them? And you know, he said, well, the first thing that he looks for is rhythm. You know, and which I wouldn't immediately have thought, you know, was a visual thing. But I think rhythm is a repeating sort of, you know, even if you watch a potter working and you see their head moving like that, you know, I think you know, rhythm is a constant in creative work, and yeah, so I think there's a lot to be learned from that as well. But no, it's great to see it. Yep.
I just wondered, did the two Peters have any chance of going to the New York World Fair with her?
No, I know that Peter Grant applied, but they didn't give him the money to go. Right. And so I think, and I think Peter Grant probably had a better chance in that he was like like there was two figures. So I think officially Herkner was the maker of the statue outside, but I think he passed over to my father the modelling of that and the casting of that. And then, but in the case of Peter Grant, he actually was the designer and maker of the figure that went in the hallway. There was a hallway of nations, I think, and he had like a warrior figure. So he applied, but they didn't give him the funding. So it's unfortunately, but
It was such a great opportunity for them in 1939.
Yeah. No, I've looked at, like, there's some very nice footage of the 1939 like World Fair. There's a lovely little video of like it being launched by a young Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. It's very nice. But it's yeah, no, it's it would have been a special time. But yeah, I think even to be involved in it, you know, is I think it would have been a nice experience.
But we got in 1968 to the World Crafts Council second meeting in New York, in Peru actually, in 1968, to make up for not going there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just one small point in background.
Sure.
The Department of Education, a guy called Ingram was in charge of it, and he's the guy that actually recognised all these young artists. You know, and the other man that's there was a guy called Micheál O'Flanagan, who was in charge of the VEC in Dublin, and he was the dynamo that, with all the restrictions that were there, that allowed Peter and my father and other people to actually give them the encouragement to start developing the arts when they were bringing back all the crafts into the college, you know, the stained glass and the weaving and the pottery and the jewellery. They were all, and Peter was involved in bringing the pottery back. He brought all those crafts back all through the war in the 1950s with no money. And the other man that was involved was a guy called Michael Cafferty. Now his daughter, Ina, is living here in Kilkenny. Her husband's a doctor. I know Ina Lindsay or Joe Connor, is it? He's a doctor here. Michael Cafferty's daughter is actually living here in Kilkenny. But they gave these guys they had the foresight, Ingram had the foresight to spot the fact that the art was so bad being taught around the country. And my father's first job was in the Department of Education, working for Micheál O'Flanagan and Michael Cafferty. They gave him the job to survey all the secondary school teaching in Ireland. So he spent from 1938 until 1941, he inspected every secondary school teacher in Ireland, and he rewrote the curriculum for all the art class teaching art, because it was just atrocious. Some were really good, but most of them were horrendous. And I have some of the pencil notes, like a basket case. So anyway, it was a fantastic lecture. Congratulations.
Well, just one final thing to say, actually, that although we can't sort of enjoy the exhibition, that first exhibition that came to Carlow, Kilkenny, the circus that came to town, the closest thing I could come to it was one of the artists that exhibited in that exhibition was Cecil Galbally, and this is a portrait of my father by Cecil Galbally at the same time. So if you want to enjoy looking at that, that's a nice thing to look at. Also, if anyone is interested, I have here copies of the catalogue from the Rothe House exhibition, so from 2008, which is effectively a book about my father that my mother put together. So I'd love if anyone would like to have that for free. We've got one for everyone in the audience that wants one.